Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Conover from Nexus Youth and Family Services, and today I'm going to be bringing you the wellness workshop for the month of October, and we're just going to be practicing a little bit of self-compassion. Why are we so hard on ourselves, and also tools to increase your own self-compassion. That's what we're going to be looking at today. We thought that this month is a good month to look at self-compassion because October is National Emotional Wellness Month. So we focus on emotional wellness for the month of October, and a big part of emotional wellness, of course, is kind of taking stock of our stress levels. So it can be a great time to make some changes if our stress levels are just a little bit too high. Depending on our demands, our emotional health can sometimes be taking the brunt of that. And so it can be really helpful if we can recognize the stress in our lives, but also to be able to identify the biggest offenders of stress in our lives so that we are aware of how to stop them. So today we're just going to provide some information and resources, mainly focusing on self-compassion. So before we talk about what self-compassion looks like and some ways to improve that, first we need to look at stress and why we experience that. A lot of the time, this is because of our natural inclination of our brain. It's called the brain's negativity bias. Okay, so our brain's main goal is just stay alive, right? The brain prioritizes avoiding danger, and it's always scanning for threats in order to accomplish this goal. And so, the negative chatter in our mind actually helps ensure our safety in a way. And, this is great for survival physically, but unfortunately, mentally and emotionally, this can often cause stress in the form of depression, anxiety, and even trauma. So as you can see in our little diagram over here, the brain filters the positive experiences straight through without recognition. But the stress and the negativity really encapsulate it, really envelops it, and it becomes all that we can react to and all that we search for. Okay. Now, what does connection have to do with stress? Well, just like our brains are wired to survive and to search for threats and attend to stressful stimuli, we are also wired, our brain is wired to want belonging and connection. And so that means, during this season of COVID, for instance, where isolation is increasingly more common, marginalized identities are even more at risk, but all of us are more prone to stress when we are more isolated. Now, the impact of stress on our brain and having an overall lack of self-compassion, which again we're going to get to in just a minute, but we've really laid out here all the different steps that this impact is made. Okay, so first it starts when we adopt labels and our negative self-talk. That is what contributes to the isolation and the loneliness that I just referred to in the previous slide. Then we move on to, we adopt this negative view that can be either projected on us by others or that we have just adopted all by ourselves, and we open ourselves up to feeling shame. And shame leads to depression in a lot of cases. And as this shame increases, so does self-criticism, this criticizing, this critical nature of ourselves, that negative self-talk keeps on stirring up. And as that increases, our self-compassion tends to decrease. It's hard to have both at the same time. And so as that shame increases, also our self-destructive behaviors increase, self-sabotage. Now, is it all just doom and gloom? Are we doomed to just be stressed out all the time and think negatively? No, thankfully not. because it is possible to essentially rewire our brain. Anybody's brain can change. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that the brain shows something called plasticity, where it can be molded in different ways based on repetition and the forming of new neural pathways. The neurons in our brains are just those brain cells that create our habits. So we can train our brain through automatic responses, and by noticing kindness in a moment, it can help improve the present and the future. So keep in mind, little disclaimer, the brain's plasticity, it is a work in progress, okay? It's not going to happen immediately at the snap of your fingers. There's a ton of opportunities every single day that we can support ourselves and create healthier habits and create those new neural pathways in our brain. But sometimes it doesn't always go as we hoped. And it's really easy, again, because we attend to the negative. Sometimes when we make a mistake or we trip up one day, it can feel like all is lost, but really it's not. Okay, so now that we've gone over all of that other stuff, we're finally ready to get to the heart of the issue, which is self-compassion. What is it? So self-compassion involves acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, whether you're failing or noticing something you maybe don't like about yourself, something you'd rather change. Instead of just ignoring your pain, you stop and acknowledge it. You acknowledge the reality of that and say, this is really difficult for me right now, but how can I comfort and care for myself in this moment? All right, and there's a great quote from Chris Germer that says, "A moment of self-compassion can change your entire day. A string of such moments can change the course of your life." So clearly this is something that is really important, and in little moments can lead up to a much bigger deal. The big question, of course, is how do we do that? So, well, we have three components here, a little formula in order to implement in our lives our own self-compassion. So the three little phases are treating yourself with kindness, sharing a common humanity, and building mindfulness. And there's a great little comic over here by Kristen Neff that kind of just breaks it down a little bit as to how these three things can kind of take place. So number one, of course, is that self-kindness, which really a good way to think about that is just caring for ourselves as much as we care for others, because there's a whole lot of us that love to help and love to be there and care for others, and yet sometimes forget about this guy right here. Number two is recognizing our common humanity, that we are all connected, a lot of us, by so many shared experiences. And then number three is mindfulness, which is just this general awareness and openness to what is happening in the moment. Okay, so being able to acknowledge that suffering, like we said in the last slide, without exaggerating it, but also without downplaying it, having a very realistic look about what you're going through, and then back to one, treating yourself with kindness. And treating yourself with kindness can take several different forms. Firstly, you can respond to yourself the way that you would towards a friend, like I was saying earlier. You can allow yourself to be imperfect and make mistakes without, talking down to yourself or punishing yourself or shaming yourself. Actively comforting yourself, that positive self-talk instead of that negative self-talk. It's going to be okay. You're doing a good job. And then knowing and being responsive to your own needs. Sometimes it is okay to leave the office, and sometimes it's okay to eat a donut, and sometimes it's okay to go for a walk. There are things that we need to be in tune with about our own needs in order to treat ourselves with kindness. For the second step, which is building a common humanity, we have a few things here in order to help accomplish that. Firstly is just recognizing that all humans are imperfect. There's something wrong with everyone, which means like we're all okay. It's normal to feel pain and to feel distress because, as I was saying, this is how we're wired. So you're not alone. I think that's a really comforting thought for a lot of us, is that you are attached to a community called humanity, right? And so here's one self-loving kindness meditation for you. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be safe, may you live with ease. This is something you can tell yourself throughout the day in order to help you find that humanity and just normalize your own humanity. Now, the third part of building mindfulness might be one of the parts that is least familiar to a lot of you. And so there's three key words when it comes to mindfulness, and that is intention, attention, and attitude. So for intention, questioning why you're doing what you're doing, and kind of just noticing the compass of your heart and where it's pointing toward on any given day or in any given moment. Attention, which is just being able to be cognizant of what are you directing your attention to. Is it always just the negative, or are you able at some moments to kind of view things positively? And then attitude, how you are paying attention. In what way are you paying attention? With what attitude? Acceptance, openness, curiosity, these are all ways to help overcome that negative self-talk. Building off of this discussion on mindfulness, how does mindfulness intersect with the topic of mental health? It can take the form of noticing automatic or intrusive thoughts. There may be certain attitudes or thoughts that are just very deeply ingrained inside of us, so being able to be mindful and aware of what those are can be helpful. Understanding that negative thoughts have no value and being able to be aware of that can be really helpful. Observing without reacting. This is something that we teach to kids a lot of the time, but we kind of forget about in adulthood, that it can be really helpful just to listen more than to speak, observe without reacting, and just kind of take stock of, what attitude you might be having in that moment. And then noticing and naming the feelings. Our bodies carry our emotions. And so being able to be aware of where we feel emotions in our body, and also being able to name those emotions and be truly aware of what emotions we are feeling in any moment, can really help us change that negative into positive. Another good quote from Kristen Neff, who drew the comic before, about self-compassion. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. Let me be kind to myself in this moment. Let me give myself the compassion I need. And like the self-loving meditation that I read earlier, this is another meditation that you could adopt and speak to yourself and give life to yourself throughout the day. Now, how does mindfulness also help rewire your brain, like our conversation from earlier? Well, firstly, again, give yourself some slack because you're kind of going against years of evolution here. And it's basic skill building, So judgment can still be valuable, Let's not just throw that out entirely and just say, hey, grace is all we need and we can just do whatever we want. That's not the point here. There are certain things that are important to still be critical about, but it's important to find the balance between the two. So we should stop comparing ourselves to others. Comparison is the thief of joy. And that can help us rewire our brains as well, as all these ways would. Now, for those of you who are looking for just some very simple, very practical ways to practice self-compassion, here you go. Firstly, you could write 2 physical attributes about yourself that you love. Describe them in detail and explain why you love them. Next, you could write 2 personality traits that you love about yourself. Describe them in detail and again explain why you love them. Another one would be to write just 3 positive words, any 3 positive words that you feel your closest friends would use to describe you and why. Sometimes it can be helpful to take the perspective of someone who we know loves us in order to help love ourselves. You could write 1 thing that you need to forgive yourself for, and then extend your self-compassion, understanding, and forgiveness, because there are certain things that we just feel deep shame about, and so sometimes it is really necessary to forgive ourselves. We can write down in detail 3 positive memories from the past year that make you feel good. And it can be helpful for that one to include, feelings and sensations and details and kind of just the sensory experience even that you had for that one. You could write 1 person that you need to forgive and what you need to forgive them for. And then you could write why and then also how you would be able to forgive them. There are certain times where people have really hurt us, and that can make it harder for us to love ourselves in a way. And so forgiveness is really tough, but there are definitely steps we can take in order to forgive others. And then lastly, just take a moment to envision yourself at your happiest. Where are you? Who you're with? What are you doing? And then write about that in detail so that you can kind of, in a way, just transport yourself to that happy moment. As a whole, how can we observe Emotional Wellness Month? I think there are 3 big ways. Firstly, you can set some goals for reducing stress in your life. Consider what your biggest stressors are and the best ways to help remove them. How do you reduce stress? Do you have a stellar support system? Right? So really being able to just look at all the different factors in our life and just try to whittle down those stressful factors little by little. And then by identifying stressors and improving our emotional health, we're more likely to surf through the highs and lows in life much more successfully if we're not just always in that fight or flight mentality. All right, and then the third one is just assess your stress. Review your financial plan, for example, or check your screen time. Use your resources, focus on healthy relationships, and then also your physical health. There are so many different ways to help reduce stress, such as exercise, such as not being on social media all the time, keeping a tighter rein on your budget. These are all things that are super, super helpful with managing that stress. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you guys liked it and learned something, and it helped you in some way. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, my name is Nathan, over here with Nexus Youth and Family Services. And this is our street address and our phone number in case you need to get a hold of us if you just need a little bit of support. All right, thank you.